Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day to all of you, depending on where you are joining us. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to our timely conversation on the trade and investment relationship between the United States and Kenya, in which we will examine in context today with the launch of the new report entitled U.S. Kenya Trade Negotiations, Implications for the Future of the U.S. Africa Trade Relationship. My name is Kendra Gaither, and I'm the Vice President of the U.S. Africa Business Center at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I'm delighted to extend a warm welcome to all of you here in the audience today, distinguished leaders, officials, entrepreneurs, eminent persons, all protocols accepted. We are most honored to welcome you today on behalf of our partners at Covington and the American Chamber of Commerce in Kenya for joining us for this forum. I would also like to take this opportunity at the beginning of this conversation to recognize and thank Witney Schneidman, who is the Senior Advisor for Africa at Covington, and Maxwell Okello, CEO of AmCham Kenya, and all of their teams, past and present, for their dedication and partnership to make today's report launch and today's event possible. The US and Kenya share an important strategic partnership, and it's one that is multifaceted, broad-based, and built on shared values and cooperation, including advancing economic prosperity. So it's no wonder that the two countries ushered in a new era of strategic partnership in February 2020 during a visit of His Excellency President Kenyatta to Washington, D.C., which included an address to the private sector at the U.S. Chamber headquarters, during which President Kenyatta announced Kenya's intention to enter into a trade deal with the United States. Today, under a new U.S. president, the business community convenes less than 24 hours after U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken chose to make his first virtual visit to Africa, include a visit to Kenya and Nigeria. It is a welcome signal for the private sector that the US government is demonstrating commitment to renewed engagement with the continent. And Secretary Blinken's choice of Kenya for the first virtual visit signals the importance of the relationship, and it's indicative of the bipartisan strong commitment to a strong US-Kenya partnership. During that virtual visit, President Kenyatta and Secretary Blinken discussed the commercial partnership and touched on the untapped potential that a bilateral free trade agreement might encompass. And just as those leaders pointed to the potential of a free trade agreement, so too do our U.S. Kenya Trade Negotiations report findings, which suggest that there is substantial potential to expand the benefits of trades between our countries. As our co-authors will highlight in a presentation, and our distinguished panel will further examine, executives in Kenya and in the United States business community share a desire to see accelerated progress to advance a high standard, comprehensive US-Kenya agreement, and view this as an optimal starting point for maturing the US-Kenya trade and investment relationship. Like yesterday's virtual visit, this bilateral trade talks would also have implications for commercial ties, and our community will have an opportunity to discuss that today. We're fortunate to be accompanied by distinguished experts and leaders in business, regional business and government affairs to offer a holistic look at the important considerations in the economic and commercial relationship that create conditions and context for future trade talks. We're especially grateful to be accompanied today by the Acting Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, Ambassador Robert Godec. Ambassador Godec, who is also revered and highly respected as a past US ambassador to Kenya, has been a stalwart partner to the Chamber, our AmChams, and leaders in business and beyond who champion strong partnership to advance shared prosperity and address shared challenges. I can think of no better leader to help us open this forum with a keynote address on remarks on the importance of the U.S. Kenya economic and commercial relationship, and what that means for the broader U.S. commercial engagement on the continent. So it's my pleasure to welcome for keynote remarks, Ambassador Godec. Ambassador Godec, welcome, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kendra, for that very wonderful and gracious introduction. Let me just say to everyone out there, good day. And since I have so many Kenyan friends and colleagues on the line, let me just say hamjambo, habari zenu. I'm very grateful to everyone who's joining today. I'm particularly grateful to you, Scott, and the entire U.S. Africa Business Center team for this invitation to speak to this very important event. You know, I've been very fortunate in my career in the Foreign Service to serve twice in Kenya, first as economic counselor and then later as ambassador. My time there was really, truly wonderful. And as many of you know, I hope all of you know, the country is extraordinarily beautiful, and the Kenyan people themselves are just amazing. And I'm sure many of you know that, of course, humans first evolved in Kenya. And Kenyans like to say that anyone who visits is coming home. Perhaps that's another reason why the country is so special. In addition to getting to know Kenya, I did have an opportunity while there to do work on a lot of different issues in areas: security, healthcare, education, climate change, and very importantly, of course, trade and investment and commercial engagement. I think we got a few things done, the Kenyans, the Americans, during the period that I was there, but there still are a lot of opportunities that remain, and seizing those opportunities, taking advantage of them for the benefit of both the Kenyans and Americans, both Kenyan people and the American people, is really very important. Africa is a priority for the Biden-Harris administration. As the president has said, we're going to be looking, though, not just to build back, but to build back better. And robust trade and investment and commercial linkages with Africa will be an important part of building back better when it comes to our relations with Africa. It's clear to me, into this administration, that Africa has growing influence and importance on the global stage. And I know that in this event, there are a diverse array of participants, including leaders from the business sector, from government, civil society, and that everyone is deeply invested in U.S. Africa relations, U.S. Kenya relations. And we continue to look to you all as partners, those of us in the U.S. government, in pursuing our shared goals of improving life, addressing challenges such as global health, combating the climate crisis, and of course, expanding economic growth, including increasing trade and investment. Because it's so much part of our lives now, I just want to say a word about the COVID-19 pandemic. It has to be said, I think, that after more than a year of confronting the pandemic, we're now facing increased challenges in pursuing our shared goals. We've really had a difficult year. We're all mourning the loss of friends and loved ones. Lives have been upended, livelihoods destroyed. The globe has really been turned upside down. To help meet this urgent need, this urgent challenge, the United States has invested approximately $500 million in emergency health, humanitarian, economic, and development assistance to sub-Saharan Africa to help fight the pandemic. We've also, in the new administration, donated $2 billion to COVAX via Gavi for vaccine procurement, and we pledged another $2 billion. This is a global challenge, and we all have to be in this effort to end this pandemic. However, there really is no doubt that COVID-19 has dealt sub-Saharan Africa a hard blow, with the region entering a recession for the first time in 25 years in 2020, making conversations like this one even more imperative. We ultimately need to restore economic growth and resume life and really get back on track. I'd also be remiss if I didn't say just a quick word about the other pressing crisis facing our planet, climate change. Last week, President Biden opened the Leaders Summit on climate by pledging a new target for the United States to achieve a 50 to 52% reduction from 2005 greenhouse gas pollution levels, and to do this by 2030. And we were very pleased that President Kenyatta was able to attend the summit. And well, there he said that climate change is no longer a future crisis, but rather a present one, and called it defining development and security challenge. Now, I'm confident that the United States and Kenya will continue to work together to grow the country's significant investments in clean energy, including geothermal, wind, and solar. And it's through efforts like these that we will, as President Kenyatta said, act in concert to bequeath our children a better future. The United States has a shared interest in Africa's success and its sustainable development. This is something we all care about and all must work for. We want to be partners with Africa in creating climate-friendly trade that secures good livelihoods for both African and American workers. And we see engagement by the private sector as the key to driving that job creation and economic growth. One of the cornerstones of the U.S. economic engagement is the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which provides beneficiary countries, of course, with duty-free access to the U.S. markets for eligible products. And currently, 39 African countries, including Kenya, are AGOA beneficiaries. Since AGOA's inception, non-oil exports from sub-Saharan Africa to the United States have increased by 250%. And Kenya has taken excellent advantage of the opportunity. Even with the successes, however, we realize that more needs to be done, particularly given that AGOA is going to expire, it's set to expire in 2025. Another important initiative that's underway to drive economic growth is Prosper Africa. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, and it has been a very important part of the U.S. effort when it comes to Africa. It's a multi-agency initiative that coordinates the efforts of U.S. government agencies with our embassies overseas to support increased two-way trade and investment. As we move forward with Prosper Africa and reinvigorate our support for trade and investment, we're taking a close look at how we can encourage more small and medium-sized businesses to engage in sub-Saharan Africa. This is a very important area. And we would really like to foster more linkages as well via businesses that are founded by members of the African diaspora in the United States. These businesses often have local knowledge that can really be key to successfully concluding deals. Additionally, we want to address the risk perceptions so that all companies can take advantage of the dynamic African economies. There are a lot of opportunities. We want to make certain that everybody has an opportunity to seize them. We are well aware that U.S. companies seek opportunities where they can compete on an even playing field and in an environment that is transparent, where the business environment is transparent. In the U.S. government, we're focused on the promotion of transparency and fair practices that are favorable to attracting high-quality investment. And we're engaged specifically in the fight against corruption, which continues to undermine growth in too many countries, including Kenya. With that in mind, I would encourage our African partners to continue their work in fostering good business environments through laws, regulations, related efforts to reduce barriers to trade, provide legal certainty for commercial transactions, and redouble skills training. All citizens can be inclusively involved and participate in the labor force and reap the benefits of investment, economic growth, and job creation. We want to see this continue really to enhance all our economies. The United States has a strong commitment to our partnership with Kenya. Just yesterday, Secretary Blinken did make his first virtual visit to Africa, and he did visit Kenya and Nigeria, and he also held a roundtable with youth from across the continent. Some of our YALI participants joined for that. It's quite a wonderful event. The Secretary's discussion with President Kenyatta was excellent. We welcome Kenya's political and economic success and growing prosperity. We really look forward to further enhancing our cooperation on democracy, human rights, global health, innovation, climate change, all of the different areas that we're working together on. One of the highlights of yesterday's visit was a visit to Kenya-based renewable energy companies, and that thanks in part to the U.S. government through Power Africa, our model of innovative, clean energy alternatives in Africa. If you did not get a chance to watch live the virtual visit, I would encourage you to view it on the State Department's YouTube channel. There's a lot there, a lot of interesting discussion, a lot of great visits. So please have a look if you get a chance. Success stories like the ones that we saw as part of the virtual visit are evidence of the vibrant trade relationship our two countries share. One that we really look forward to strengthening, expanding as we work to increase economic growth in Kenya and cultivate new opportunities for both American and Kenyan businesses. We really can't do this without your help, though. The U.S. government will do what it can, certainly, to support increased trade and investment between Kenya and the United States. But we need you too. So my team here in Washington, at the State Department and other agencies as well here, and the U.S. Embassy team in Nairobi need to hear from you. With your feedback on both the opportunities and challenges of doing business in Africa, we're going to be able to continue to make further progress and build cooperation. Finally, I know many of you here are looking forward to discussing the U.S. Kenya Free Trade Agreement negotiations and the report on that subject that the U.S. Chamber and its partners are launching today. I also look forward to hearing the Chamber's report on the negotiations. I understand that the discussions between our U.S. Trade Representative, our new U.S. Trade Representative, and Cabinet Secretary Mwencha were very positive. They had an introductory call on April 1st. The two sides are currently reviewing the negotiations before deciding on next steps. The U.S. Trade Representative looks forward to discussions with Secretary Mwencha to deepen the U.S. trade relationship with Kenya. With that, I would like to thank you again for the privilege of speaking with you today and the opportunity to be part of this event. Kenya really does have a very special place in my heart, so I am very grateful for this opportunity. And since this meeting is really about Kenya and the United States, let me just close with a phrase that I used often when I was there. Pamoja, Tusonge, Mbele. Together, we move forward. Thank you all very, very much. I hope you have a very successful meeting today.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Godec. We are honored to have you with us as Acting Assistant Secretary with such positive remarks that really speak to the potential of the U.S.-Kenya strong partnership. So we are deeply grateful for that. We will next turn now to have a look and a review of the report as the Acting Assistant Secretary alluded to, and we're honored to invite our partners from Covington and to introduce the report, beginning first with Witney Schneidman, Senior Advisor for Africa at Covington, to get us started.
Thank you, Kendra. It's great to be here with you all. Good morning and good afternoon to everybody who has joined us. Let me start by thanking Ambassador Godec for taking time from his incredibly busy schedule as Acting Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, and for providing those insightful and encouraging remarks. It is hard to think of any individual who has done as much as he has to strengthen the U.S.-Kenya relationship. And for that, we are incredibly grateful for your service, Ambassador. Let me also add that it was terrific to see Secretary Blinken's virtual visit to Kenya yesterday, his dialogue with President Kenyatta and Cabinet Secretary Omamo. I think it's an accurate reflection of President Biden's repeated refrain that Africa will be a priority for this administration, and it's great to see. Now, pivoting to the report, just let me give some context. When we came up with the idea for embarking on this project, the COVID-19 pandemic was just beginning. It was extending its pernicious grip on countries, economies, families, and individuals across the globe. At the time, our goal was relatively simple: to try to look out over the horizon at the challenges and opportunities presented by the proposed U.S. Kenya Free Trade Agreement. In fact, there have been fundamental changes since we started our work that have significance for the prospects for the U.S. Kenya FTA. There's a new administration in Washington, D.C. The implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement has begun, and the growing availability of vaccines raises the hope for a post-COVID world, although I think it's fair to say that we still have a long, long way to go. Now, before Kate McNulty, my colleague, and I try to summarize the report, let me express my sincere thanks to those individuals at the more than 30 American and Kenyan companies, as well as to those former officials in the United States and Africa who took time to share their insights about the significance of a U.S. Kenya FTA with us. And those views are reflected in the report. Let me also thank our colleagues at the Chamber's U.S. Africa Business Center and AmCham Kenya who made this report happen. It is hard to think of a more ideal and collaborative partnership than the one that produced this study. For this collaboration, my Covington colleagues, Kate, Jay Ireland, Mosam Kise, Shivani Naidu, and I are most grateful. So where are we? When Congress passed the African Growth and Opportunity Act in 2000, the legislation was designed to achieve several objectives. One was to move from aid to trade as a stimulus for economic development. Another objective was to deepen the commercial relationship between the United States and many African markets. The architects of AGOA also intended the legislation to be a stepping stone to a more mature trade relationship, including free trade agreements. And that brings us to February 2020, when the Kenyan government came forward to declare its interest to negotiate a trade deal with the United States. And today that moment is defined by several realities. As Ambassador Godec conveyed, the Biden administration has put a pause on all trade negotiations that the previous administration was pursuing. The AFCFTA is generating a lot of excitement as it begins to create the world's largest free trade area. And as Ambassador Godec said, AGOA is set to expire 4 years from now in 2025. And perhaps most important, Africa has changed in fundamental ways since AGOA was passed in 2000. Today, there are now 25 middle-income countries on the continent. 14 countries in sub-Saharan Africa are implementing free trade agreements with the European Union. China has become Africa's dominant commercial partner. And last month, Kenya announced a free trade deal with the UK. Now, in writing this report, we agreed that we would not make any policy recommendations, that we would leave that to the pros. So in keeping with that spirit, I would like to conclude with one observation, and that is the United States has never faced such a challenging trade environment in Africa, where it needs to move to a more reciprocal trade relationship with its key partners while modernizing AGOA for those countries that are not ready for a reciprocal relationship. And the US needs to pursue these objectives in such a way that is fully supportive of the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So with that, let me turn it over to my friend and colleague, Kate McNulty, who will drill down on some of our key findings. Kate, over to you.
Thank you, Witney. As Witney noted, last year we embarked upon this study that we are launching today to take stock of the developments relating to U.S. Kenya trade negotiations, as well as identifying commercial priorities of greatest interest to business leaders in both countries. I want to summarize very quickly what we learned from this exercise. First, we know that a trade agreement between the United States and Kenya would be unique in important respects. Most obviously, it would be the first FTA between the United States and a country in sub-Saharan Africa. Nevertheless, a US FTA with Kenya could still build on lessons already learned from prior FTAs, particularly those the United States has concluded with countries at similar levels of economic development. That's not to say that a U.S. Kenya FTA will or should conform to existing FTA models, but rather these models can be instructive for negotiators and business leaders alike. For instance, just as a U.S. Kenya FTA has been envisioned as a framework to supersede trade preferences provided under AGOA, the United States has previously negotiated FTAs that were similarly designed to build on other trade preference programs, including those for Central and Latin America. Furthermore, the United States has negotiated FTAs with countries at the same level of economic development as Kenya, namely Honduras and Nicaragua, which are both parties to the US FTA with Central America known as CAFTA-DR. In this respect, CAFTA-DR could be instructive with respect to the types of flexibilities that can be implemented to account for the asymmetrical levels of development between the United States and Kenya, including, for example, CAFTA-DR's incremental approach to liberalization of market access, gradual phase-in periods for obligations under the agreement, and safeguard mechanisms made available for the most sensitive products. In addition, while a US Kenya FTA would be the first with a sub-Saharan African country and the United States has concluded an FTA with a Northern African country, namely Morocco. In this respect, the US-Morocco Free Trade Agreement may also be instructive. While two-way trade between the United States and Morocco has increased dramatically since the FTA entered into force in January 2006, Moroccan business leaders and policy watchers interviewed for this study were particularly clear about the continued need to overcome logistical and knowledge barriers to growing exports to the United States, which may also be relevant for Kenya. Turning now to what we learned from this study with respect to commercial priorities for US and Kenyan businesses, this report identified several key horizontal issues and sector-specific interests. First, increasing predictability was by far the #1 priority issue raised throughout the interviews that we conducted for this study. For Kenyan businesses, this means mitigating the uncertainty associated with the annual eligibility review process that takes place under AGOA. In addition, for both US and Kenyan businesses, key obligations for any FTA would also include those addressing transparency, anti-corruption, good regulatory practices, and government procurement. These obligations were specifically identified as critical for improving the business environment in Kenya and encouraging more US investment into the country. In addition, both US and Kenyan stakeholders expressed a strong interest in promoting inclusive economic growth, namely economic opportunities for small and medium enterprises, or SMEs. Kenyan business leaders and policy watchers in particular expressed hope that an FTA would lead to an increase in the number of higher quality jobs generated by a growing economy. Very closely tied to this promotion of SMEs and the achievement of inclusive growth, interview respondents also identified the facilitation of digital trade as absolutely critical and important to include as an objective of any FTA. The economic importance of digital trade has obviously been underscored by the recent COVID-19 pandemic, as governments and populations have increasingly sought to use digital options as an alternative to ensure continued business activity while maintaining social distancing. Interview respondents underscored the role that high standard digital trade disciplines also play in creating certainty for businesses navigating the fast changing and increasingly complicated web of laws, regulations, standards, and other measures that contribute to global data governance. At the same time, some challenges to digital trade exist, including one issue flagged repeatedly, Kenya's implementation of a digital service tax effective January of this year. Another sector-specific issue identified by US and Kenyan business leaders as a priority for addressing in the FTA is increasing trade in agriculture, and particularly tackling the issue of trade in genetically modified organisms, or GMOs. The ban that Kenya has imposed on most imports of GMOs, including feed, imports, and food, has been an obstacle for agricultural trade between the United States and Kenya, and has also disrupted and served as an obstacle to US trade to other parts of the continent. While the cultural opposition to GMOs in Kenya will be a particular challenge, business leaders also indicated there are potential benefits to Kenya in addressing this issue as well, including increasing efficiencies in agricultural supply chains in Kenya and lowering consumer expenditures on food. Finally, US and Kenyan business leaders identified as a priority objective the expansion of reciprocal market access more generally, which would not only make US goods and services more competitive with competing products from Europe, but would also signal to China and others Kenya's interest in diversifying its commercial relationships. With these conclusions in mind, I will now turn over to Maxwell Okello, who will moderate our panel today, diving into these issues in more depth.
Thank you very much, Kate and Whitney. You know, it's an amazing job that you've done to summarize what is a 47-page report in just under 10 minutes. So thank you for that. A special thank you to Kendra for kicking us off, and of course to Ambassador Godec, who's the Acting Assistant Secretary for African Affairs at the State Department. So good morning and good evening, everybody. My name is Maxwell Okello. I'm the Chief Executive of the American Chamber of Commerce in Kenya. It is an honor to moderate today's panel on this momentous occasion of the launch of this one-of-a-kind report on the U.S. Kenya Trade Negotiations, the implications for the future of a U.S. Africa Trade Relationship. And as been said previously, this could not be more timely with the virtual visit by Secretary of State Antony Blinken to Africa, and specifically, as you heard, to Kenya to reaffirm the bilateral strategic partnership and future cooperation between our two countries. It also comes at a time when governments are starting to look toward the future, to how they can jumpstart economic recovery. And trade and investment is certainly one of the tools that can help ignite economic recovery. We are privileged today to have with us a preeminent panel of business and industry leaders to give us perspective on the implications and opportunities for growth that an FTA would create. In the interest of time, we sent in advance the panelist bios. So you can have a look at that, you can review that. I'm sure you already got those. And so we'll quickly, I'll quickly introduce the panelists and then jump into the conversation. So today we have with us Brenda Mbathi, who's the president of GE in East Africa, and is also my board president at the AmCham here in Kenya. We also have with us Ambassador Erastus Mwencha, who's the chair of the board of the Trademark East Africa. We have with us as well Raghav Prasad, the division president, Sub-Saharan Africa at MasterCard. And we also have with us Charles Murito, Director, Sub-Saharan Africa, Government and Public Affairs at Google. So panelists, if you could please turn on there we go, great. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll jump right into it. As you know, one of the key challenges we have is just being able to condense this very, very broad conversation in the 20 or so minutes that we have left. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to do that. So the first question I'm going to address to all of you. As you know, the U.S. Kenya FTA has been envisioned, to be a robust and comprehensive FTA, comparable to agreements that the U.S. has previously negotiated with other more developed economies, and also to set the tone for U.S. trade policy toward Africa. So this report that we're launching today did highlight, as Kate and Witney have just done, some of the aspects that the findings, if I may put it that way, where the negotiation process could have impact for both countries and the US's trade relationship with the African continent. What are your biggest takeaways from the report? about how the potential opportunities, about what the potential opportunities for both US and Kenya are from a possible trade agreement. And I'll give the honor to the lady on the panel to kick us off. Brenda, you go first.
Thank you, Maxwell. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. And indeed, let me also give my thanks to Kendra for the introductory remarks. A warm and a very well appreciated thank you to Ambassador Godec, a true friend of Kenya, for his remarks. And thank you to Witney and Kate for your comprehensive debrief of this report. I'm really pleased to be here today to be part of this conversation on the Kenya-US trade negotiations. Let me speak on behalf of AmCham for this question. As AmCham Kenya, I want to confirm that we fully support the efforts of the government of Kenya and the United States to negotiate a comprehensive, high-standard trade agreement to enhance two-way private sector trade and investment. We have held the view that a predictable, and this is what Kate mentioned in her remarks, as being the most important factor for stakeholders on both sides, a predictable long-term framework for expanded, fair and reciprocal trade regime between US and Kenya will not only spur mutual economic growth, but will also accelerate growth for SMEs, which are small and medium enterprises. It will create jobs. It will also improve the standard of living and support the development agenda. And I have to say the development agenda for both parties. And indeed, we keep talking about AGOA. And this is an example of a very successful trade agreement where the benefits Kenya saw exporting under AGOA, and we continue to see, literally resuscitated certain sectors of the Kenyan economy, especially the apparel sector. An FTA would preserve and build on these benefits. It would expand the number of sectors which would gain from US market access. And at the same time, it would level the playing field for American businesses to participate in opportunities available in Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We go to Ambassador Mwencha.
Thank you very much, Maxwell, and I'm also grateful to the authors of the report for the presentation. Africa has always had a huge desire to have trade relationship with the United States, but not just trade, but also investment. And that's why there was that quest for AGOA. I was privileged to be part of AGOA initiative right from the beginning, pushing from Congress so that that would be undertaken. But what is the experience? It hasn't really sparked of those intended objectives which were outlined. One of the reasons that has happened behind this, first, I'm going to make 4 points in that regard. The first one is to say, and this is also, in the report, there hasn't been huge appetite and the capacity of knowledge of American companies of Africa. There is no in-house knowledge of American companies of Africa, and the premium of risk is very high. This was mentioned even by Ambassador Godec. And because of that, that risk perception has always been a hindrance. I think this is a point that should be looked at inside. The second one, the government has been very less supportive to outward investment out of America. And so even as we move to this second level of cooperation, I think America needs to look at itself, not driven just by fear of Europe or China, but what does America do to support American investments abroad? The second point that I want to make, and I agree with the report, that unilateral trade relationships are not as superior as reciprocal trade arrangements. And we can see that one of the tenets is predictability. But beyond predictability is stability. It enhances investment and attracts more stable cooperation. But what are the opportunities? I think we must now, as Kenya, and ask ourselves, do we want to continue to export a limited range of products that are found in this list, textiles and food products primarily? This is an opportunity for Kenya to get into fourth industrial generation. Is America ready to download skills, to download digital economy? Because this is where we should be going. And I think that is what the report should put. What is it that we should do? We have had cooperation with America, which has focused on health, security, education, but now let's upgrade skills so that Africa can join a global supply chain, Africa can be competitive. And I think the fourth point I want to make is the elephant in the room. How do we approach these negotiations? There are two areas that I would like to address here. First, let us take the approach that has been talked about, and that is an asymmetrical approach. With that asymmetrical approach, we must also make sure that when we front load the American obligations, we allow enough time based not on time bound, but bound on benchmarks so that we can be sure that this will not fracture economies weak as that of Kenya. And I think this is, to me, a key point. It is the net, how do we structure these negotiations? The last point, and in that context, American approach to negotiations, if you look at SACU, why did they fail? It is in the report. It is because they are very comprehensive and very inflexible. That point is important. The last point, I think this is important for us to take into account that when Kenya gets into this level, it is not going to be a walk in the park. You must build capacity. Kenya needs to build capacity, and that capacity in the negotiations, but also in some of the key areas. And I think we should also take into account that this is an entry point for the rest of the continent to lock in, and it must be done in such a way it doesn't frustrate the regional integration in the continent.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that, Ambassador Mwencha. I'll go on to Charles. Your thoughts?
Thank you, Maxwell. Thank you, Kendra, for gathering this meeting together. It's an absolute pleasure to be on this call with the distinguished panelists. Just a couple of key points that I wanted to build on, both what Brenda and Ambassador Mwencha just touched on. The first point I wanted to make is that we don't also have to start from scratch. I think we can also learn from other FTAs, UFTAs that have gone ahead of us. A great example of that is the U.S. MCA FTA that was done last year or late 2019. On the U.S. Canada-Mexico agreement, that particular agreement had some very progressive clauses which looked at creating that, in this case, a three-way trade model. And I think that as we're looking at the Kenya-US Free Trade Agreement, it's critical to ensure that we do that. And I do want to dig down onto one particular protocol in those particular agreements, which is the digital protocol. I think we really need to find a way, as Ambassador Mwencha mentioned regarding digitization, is how do we ensure that the FTA has built in great progressive policies that we can be able to leverage from other markets which have gone ahead of us, but also that deliver value for Kenya. And some of those things which also need to be aligned with AFICTA and the digital protocol for AFICTA are things such as cross-border data flows. We've spoken quite a lot in terms of creating these centers of excellence across the continent. Each country is not large enough to be a specialist in every single sector. So we do need to look at Africa as a big market, but also start leveraging the powers and the strengths of each country. And Kenya has been extremely successful, for instance, around the fintech area. So how do we ensure that with the US Free Trade Agreement, the US Kenya Free Trade Agreement, the digital protocol lays down a really strong cross-border data flows language in that particular area. Skills is another one. There's been a lot of research that has said that over the next 5 years, Africa stands to gain over $300 billion of economic output from the digital ecosystem. The one thing that will hold us back is lack of the skill sets and knowledge to be able to leverage that. So how do we ensure that there's that transfer of skills from the US to Kenya and vice versa, so that Kenya becomes a center of excellence when it comes to digital areas? And so with those two points I wanted to touch on, I want to say that the US Kenya Free Trade Agreement is one that we should really work closely to see over the finish line, work closely between private sector and government, ensure that we deliver the technical expertise, working closely with government to ensure that the right skill sets are captured in that particular agreement. and see how Kenya can truly be the North Star as we're moving into the AFCFTA digital protocol later on this year into early 2022, that can be a strong model that can be leveraged even for AFCFTA going forward. Thank you, Max.
Thank you, Charles, for that. And we'll definitely come back to some of the points that you've touched on. Let me bring Prasad into the conversation as well. Prasad, your thoughts on that initial question? What are some of the key takeouts for you from this report and the potential opportunities for both US and Kenya?
Thank you, Max. In the interest of time, I will use one of my favorite African phrases that I learned a little while ago, which is all protocols observed. I think I just want to make three very, very quick points. Firstly, I think the U.S. Kenya FTA serves, the most important bit is it serves as a blueprint, I think, not just for Kenya's FTA, but also for further U.S. agreements on the continent. And the defragmentation of economies that will come from this will lead to a proliferation of common global standards that we believe will accelerate both intra-Africa integration and, to Charles's point, create scale across the marketplace, across Africa. And this is critical for competitiveness, right? And to attract FDI into these economies. So I think that's the broad point I'd make. The specific points I'd make would be, one, most importantly, and to Ambassador Mwencha's comment, the FTA will increase predictability of the business environment. And this could be a beacon, right? Not just for Kenya in other economic spaces, but the broader sub-Saharan Africa region. We believe that the predictability is absolutely essential. And the FTA would allow us to set out global disciplines, standards, and procedures that will help improve the business environment. And this is absolutely critical, to Charles's point again, for the digital economy, where global standards, global scale is fundamental for resilience, for security, for interoperability, and for innovation. The idea is to leverage the investment, the billions of dollars of investment that is happening globally, and bring it and make it real for the Kenyan market. And the final point I'd make is just that the common set of standards and regulations, I think, will also reduce unilateral and protectionist measures. Increased complex or unilateral taxation, for example, can be detrimental to the business environment. And it is crucial that the U.S. Kenya FTA ensures certainty regarding taxation policy, for example, to fully unleash the potential of the digital economy that is just ready and waiting to happen. Thank you.
Excellent, great. Thank you very much, Prasad, for that. I want to just kick it up a little. And Brenda, we've heard a lot about predictability and some of those key aspects that business is taking into account when it comes to this FTA. As the regional CEO of a multinational and multi-faced industrial leader like GE, headquartered in Kenya, regional headquarters in Kenya, how do trade agreements such as the FTA influence investment decisions for a multinational company such as yours? And then secondly, I know you did touch a little on the perspective from AmCham, but it would be good to hear what are some of the signals or expectations that negotiations generally, these negotiations in particular, would create or are creating locally for both Kenyan and American businesses.
Thank you, Maxwell. And also thank you to all the panelists today, in case I don't get an opportunity to thank you for the partnership. The first thing I'd want us to acknowledge is that Kenya was willing to raise their hand to look to strike a deal with the US. And this is really important, as it confirms that Kenya expressed openness and the desire to work with the US on an FTA. This is very important for investors, because investors want to invest in markets that are keen and open to receive them. Indeed, earlier this year, Kenya ratified a new bilateral trade agreement with the United Kingdom. So Kenya is illustrating that it is open for business and there's opportunity for everyone. And this is a great thing for investors. This proposed FTA is an excellent framework for US investors, and it's important to acknowledge that the environment is open for commercial, private sector-led relationships between both American and Kenyan companies who are well poised to benefit from this FTA. This FTA will provide a platform that will allow for unfettered trade and investment to create transformation for both Kenya and the US, and looks to create opportunity for all. And the potential to create an opportunity for Kenya to position itself as the destination on the continent for US companies who are considering manufacturing in Africa. And so it's really hoped that both governments will continue to have a strong commitment to a successful outcome, although the challenges ahead cannot be minimized. So coming specifically to the role of AmCham Kenya, there are several things we focus on at AmCham. And one of our core mandates as AmCham is trade and investments. And under trade and investments, what we do is harness the direct promotion of opportunities both in Kenya and in the US together with our respective governments. We have held forums in the US, and this was touched on earlier, where we've engaged with both the private and public sectors, and we have pitched opportunities that are available in Kenya. And we do similar activities here in Kenya. We're an integral member of the local Kenyan U.S. FTA working group, which was established last year. And apart from the direct market linkages and promoting Kenya as an investment destination, we also bridge Kenyan and American companies with the governments as we look to advocate for a favorable investment operational climate. And we also cannot underestimate our flagship event, the Kenyan AmCham Business Summit. So I want to confirm that Kenya supports both the proposed FTA and also other regional trade agreements, namely those within the EAC and also the AFTAC. And all these efforts will mutually reinforce Kenya's growth and development goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brenda. And I want to pick it up from the regional trade agreements and bring in Ambassador Mwencha into this. Ambassador, you are previously the former deputy chairperson of the Africa Union Commission. You are also the former Secretary General of the COMESA. And we all know that Kenya is a member of several of these regional economic communities. EAC, I've talked about COMESA that you were Secretary General of before. There's SADC as well. There's the COMESA EAC SADC tripartite free trade area. And more recently, as we've had and we know, the African Continental Free Trade Area. What would you say, Ambassador, is the significance of these trade agreements, these regional blocs, and how do you see them helping position Kenya to attract more foreign direct investment through a trade agreement with the US?
Thank you very much. The combined GDP of Africa is now 3.5 trillion US dollars. And the population of Africa is 1.3 billion people with a median age of about 20 people. Besides that, if you look at the resources in Africa, where the land, natural resources is huge. Although these have not been good enough to attract investment to Africa. Why? Many African countries are fragmented, small in nature, and the cost of doing business is very high because of many countries are also not sea linked, they are land linked. That has always affected trade with the rest of the world. And so two key points here that we should note. One, the trade arrangement in the region make it easier for the countries to be able to learn international trade practices, but also the trade arrangements they've entered into will help them to lock in a mechanism of doing business with the US. But I think the key point here is also, are we going to have robust rules of origin, which will encourage regional accumulation? That is extremely important. The second point that I should mention here is that when it comes to the regional integration and the continent, and this trade, it is extremely important that as Kenya becomes the entry point, we engage these regional integration schemes so that they lock in and negotiate a trade arrangement in such a way that it will enable them to either revise it or be able to enter without having to walk away from it all. And that will create problems for us all. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that perspective, Ambassador. Raghav, MasterCard is a leader in the financial inclusion space. I think that goes without saying, and has forged a number of partnerships to support and drive digital innovation. And the whole aspect of digital trade and digital innovation has featured quite prominently in the report as well as in the conversation today. How does a stronger U.S.-Kenya commercial relationship help promote broader financial inclusion efforts that your company and I believe others are championing in Kenya and the continent? You are on mute.
My apologies. Thank you, Max. As I'm sure you're aware, MasterCard has a credo that we follow around the world, which is doing well by doing good. And a part of that is to drive financial inclusion around the world. A few years ago, we committed to bring 500 million people around the world into financial services and financially include them. We actually achieved that goal last year. And we've now committed to add an additional 500 million people and bring them into the financial system. 100 million of that last time was in Africa. And we have again committed to add an additional 100 million financially included people in the African continent. A broader U.S. Kenya FTA will actually have, as I said earlier, a lot of benefits. Most importantly, the predictability and in the business environment, which will encourage us as MasterCard, for example, to invest more time, more effort, more monetary impact into the continent. Just let me give you two examples. MasterCard set up the MasterCard Lab for Financial Inclusion in Nairobi, actually, a few years ago, with a commitment to build products for financial inclusion in Africa. And against the plan, as I said, to now add an additional 500 million consumers into the financial economy by 2025, using public and private partnerships with governments, with the private sector, and NGOs. One outcome of this, for example, is the MasterCard Farmers Network that was created here in Africa, in Nairobi, and is a platform that digitizes marketplaces, payments and workflows, and farmer financial histories within the agriculture sector. And the platform brings together the various agri-sector stakeholders, such as farmers, farmer producer organizations, buyers, financial institutions, and value-added service providers, that allows the small farmers, the micro farmers, to be able to actually do digital transactions, to be able to borrow money from micro lending institutions for farming inputs like seeds and fertilizers. It is this kind of investment that we will be able to make at a higher, more accelerated pace, and to be able to continue to invest not just now, but going forward, when we are able to operate within the framework of a U.S. Kenya FTA.
Mm-hmm. Great. I want to finish off with you, Charles, and the aspect of economic opportunities for small and medium-sized companies and the broader agenda around inclusion and job creation. I think is a critical one that not only the report highlighted, but one that is apparent in our daily engagements and discourse, both here in Kenya and I believe in the US as well. The report that we're launching today has highlighted an emphasis on small business growth, an issue that is especially important, as I've said, to both governments, to jumpstart economic recovery. Can you share with us how you see this FTA incentivizing investment into Kenya's ICT ecosystem, and also how that would help stimulate SME growth in the digital economy?
Max, SMBs are a vital sector of any economy to thrive. If SMBs thrive in a country, then the country's economy will thrive. Another additional angle to this is the number of women-led SMBs. Most SMBs, more than 60% of SMBs in Kenya are actually run by women. So, and as you know, with now a different lens to it. When you empower a woman, you empower the family. That is something that has consistently been proven. So what's great about this particular report, and touching on the piece around SMBs, is that it builds on a couple of other reports that were done last year. One of them being the Africa Economy Report that looked at the opportunity around the startup ecosystem, the SMB ecosystem, and some of the challenges that are holding back Kenya and the continent from achieving its full opportunity. Another white paper that was released late last year is the Digital Sprinters Report, which I want to touch on a couple of key points because they really build on how SMBs can really thrive from this and how the FTA can really be a platform to enable the success of SMBs in our economy. On the Digital Sprinters framework, we looked at 4 different key pillars. The first one is around physical capital. And when you think about this, most telcos across Kenya and across the continent have to compete and buy the different pieces from other countries and import them in, whether it's a Cisco or a Huawei component. And the taxation regimes on that are many times astronomical. So we need to ensure that as a free FTA is coming online, we're able to look at how do we ensure affordable internet economy so that more SMBs can be able to leverage the internet opportunity and reach new markets. And that's really important. And then the second pillar is around human capital. Ambassador Mwencha, as well as Raghav, mentioned on this regarding the skill sets. And this is something that we really need to think about, how we're enabling more SMBs to learn the opportunities and the skill set that they can require to reach the broader audiences. And they cannot be able to do that if they don't have those skills. Some of those skills require simple things such as web capacity and building web and getting those businesses online, etc. But also encouraging more startups that are digitally led. And that is really important. And then the third piece is around competitiveness. And an FTA really brings this home. We need to ensure that the policies that are coming to play are actually forward-looking, that they are creating a level playing field for both Kenyan as well as US companies, and that those Kenyan companies can be able to reach the US market and those SMBs. And I'll give a quick example. Peperuka is a t-shirt and a printing company here in Kenya. There's no reason that Peperuka should not be a global company. What they need are the right skill sets, a level playing field, understanding what the tariffs to get their t-shirts, their mags, and everything else to California, to New York. And the great thing is, today we have the supply chain and the logistics that in 72 hours, you can send a t-shirt from Nairobi at an affordable rate to California, right? And that end consumer will receive it. And then last but not least is the adoption of technology. This ties in everything else. Whether you're thinking about a traditional t-shirt maker like Peperuka or an ag farmer somewhere in Kenya, and Twiga Foods has been a great example of this, or someone who is more in the gemstones industry, how are they leveraging technology and AI to be able to reach their markets more broadly? And the example I want to give is Market Finder is a tool at Google that we have that enables small businesses to reach markets abroad that have the potential to buy their products using AI and other algorithms. And that is how we look at this to say that SMBs are really the foundation of a successful economy. They enable, get more women and really get more women to have or sort out the discriminatory labor force. And so that is so critical. And so just in closing, again, the 4 pillars: physical capital, human capital, competitive landscape, as well as technology. If we can get those 4 things together, I think that we'll have a really successful FTA between Kenya and the US.
No, thank you so much, Charles, for just bringing that up together for us. And I think that's a really good place to bring this panel to a close. In the interest of time, I just want to thank Brenda, Ambassador Mwencha, Charles, Raghav. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your insights. Thank you for keeping time. I know we had just about 20 minutes, 20 minutes to carry on this really, really robust conversation. I'm sure the audience has definitely taken away value from the insights that you've shared. So thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, indeed, there is a lot of opportunity that exists to spur trade and investment between Kenya, Africa, and the US. And we are convinced, and as you heard from the various voices on this panel, that the FTA can be a necessary catalyst to stimulate these opportunities for growth. The goal that both Kenya and the US have reiterated is to have an FTA that works for both countries. Our report has sought to contribute to the dialogue on how that can be achieved by providing factual analysis of trade issues and by documenting insights from business and stakeholders within the broader context of the U.S. Africa trade. Developments relating to COVID pandemic have also been taken into account, and the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, as well as the expiration of the Africa Growth Opportunity Act, or AGOA, in 2025. Now, of course, there are issues, some challenges, some which were highlighted by Ambassador Mwencha, including increasing the level of awareness of trade benefits, the market opportunities, standards, requirements for market entry, accessibility to trade facilitation services, the big, hairy, audacious challenge around financial or financing for trade. These continue to be key pieces that need to be addressed to ensure the success of any policy or legislative action. And of course, as AmCham, as the US Africa Business Center, at the US Chamber, as Covington, we are committed to spearhead these conversations. So bottom line, there is a resounding message from both Kenyan and American business executives that we interviewed. And that is that they and we would like to see accelerated progress to advance a high standard and comprehensive U.S. Kenya FTA. It is our hope that this report contributes to advancing the vital dialogue amongst all stakeholders about the future of trade between Kenya, Africa, and the United States. So again, a special thank you to our partners, the U.S. Chamber, Africa Business Center, to Covington, and all the rest who've been involved in this process for your partnership. I think I cannot gainsay this. This has been an amazing collaborative effort, and the results of which we are all very proud of. To our audience, thank you all for making time to join us today. Please get your copy of the report. It will be uploaded on the three websites of the various partners. We welcome you to read it. Please read it and share your thoughts with us. This is an ongoing conversation, and we certainly invite you to give us feedback. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of our session today. And we really look forward to having further conversations around the FTA as the progress on this conversation unfolds. So once again, thank you for joining us. Have a great evening for those who are in Kenya, and a wonderful day for those in the US. Thank you, Hasanteni, and Kwaherini nyote. Bye-bye.